Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. This episode of Playas Guide is continuing on with the NES collecting video. This episode is going to cover Rare NES games. So, I'm going to dive right into it. To start things off, the rarest NES game, and I think everybody knows it, is NWC. Now, you may not count this towards a complete licensed North American collection, or you may. That's up to you. There's two different cartridges. One is gold, one is gray. They were both giveaways. However, the gray one was actually used for the competition, and many of the winners or those who advanced to the next bracket and made it to the finals received a copy of this game, making it extremely rare. There is thought to be 300 copies of Nintendo World Championships in existence based off the numbers on the carts that we do know exist. There are around 100 confirmed copies that are in collectors' hands. However, the next rarest game is an easy one to guess. That's Stadium Events. Now, most people do count this game towards the North American licensed collection, and this is the one that they have a hard time getting a hold of. Stadium Events was a game released by Bandai in companion with the Power Pad, but at that time it was called the Family Fun Fitness Pad. Now, Nintendo wanted this pad so that they could rebrand it as the Power Pad and package it with their own console and sell it on their own with some of their own games, which they did end up doing. So they purchased the Family Fun Fitness Pad from Bandai, rebranded it, and also took Stadium Events off store shelves. There is speculation that it was for sale for about 3 weeks. Some people say 3 days. It's really hard to say. I mean, there's no exact number. You can't say, well, the guy took it off the shelf at every store across the country on this day and they were all gone. Nobody knows for sure. We do know that Nintendo had a minimum print run of 10,000 for any game. So it is possible that the games out there did sell and others were not released from that print run. It is speculated that there are only 300 salvaged copies in existence. That number is not confirmed or definite. It's all speculation. So Nintendo did rebrand Stadium Events as World Class Track Meet, pretty much the same game except for the title screen, and that game is a dime a dozen. It is very common. You should have no problem getting your hands on it if you're just looking to play the game. So, the probably most affordable but still very expensive game on the list, and you could count it as your number one, and it is number one in most people's complete North American NES libraries. That is Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. Short form known as F2 because it is the second Flintstones game released on the NES. Now, this game was originally thought to be a Blockbuster exclusive. However, it is confirmed that the only existing sealed copy of the game was purchased when some collectors bought out a Ma rental store. So we do know that it was a rental exclusive and not necessarily a Blockbuster exclusive. Flintstones did see an increase in volume of copies because there were some found in Chile, and or it was a more common game in Chile and people were buying them from Chile and then switching out the backs because the back had a different back in Chile, but otherwise the board and the label were identical to the one that we had in North America. The next game on this list, you guessed it, it's Little Samson. This is a very expensive game, more expensive than Flintstones, however not more rare. So the deal with Little Samson is it's a great game. A lot of people want to have it, and it is up there in rarity. It's right next to Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, so it's very desirable. It's a lot of collectors and gamers want to have a fun game and a rare game to add to their collection. So this is why it is a little bit more expensive than Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak, at least during the filming of this video. Following up Little Samson is Panic Restaurant. This game is another one. A lot of these games were late releases. They didn't get much exposure, so nobody really knew much about Panic Restaurant. Flew under the radar. And a lot of places where you might have purchased a copy of this would have been like a rental store who may have only had one copy for rent, and that's all they purchased. And a lot of times these rare rental games got damaged. Now, I'm not saying Panic Restaurant was a rental exclusive. We don't know that. But I'm just using this as an example that there may not be many copies out there, and they're not always going to be in the best condition because of examples like this. Following up, Panic Restaurant is Bonk's Adventure on the NES. Bonk's Adventure is a well-known platformer on the TurboGrafx. On the NES, it was a late release and didn't get much exposure, and that, as we know, for a lot of these games equals rarity. It's also a pretty decent game, so good games that are rare tend to sell for a lot more than games that are good and not rare, or just games that are just plain rare. Another fun game to follow that one up is Power Blade 2, which is also very rare. Also maybe falls into the same boat along the lines of Panic Restaurant, where one or two rental stores in your city might have got a copy, and maybe it ended up in the trash, maybe it got into some rough shape, but it exists and it's hard to get, and especially if you're looking for a copy in good condition. Bubble Bobble Part 2, another example of a rental exclusive game that you're not going to always see in the greatest shape. However, I do seem to see this game around in pretty good shape more often than not at a lot of gaming conventions. Now, years ago, you didn't see it too often, but since the price has really gone up on a lot of these rare games, you are going to see them at different gaming conventions and swap meets. But Bobble Bobble Part 2 seems to be one that I see frequently, and it was thought to be one of the absolute rarest games at one time. Snow Brothers is another rare game, kind of along the lines of Bubble Bobble Part 2. This one hasn't seen quite the price hike like a lot of these other rare games on this list have. In fact, some of the other rare games I'm going to mention may be more expensive, but without a doubt, Snow Brothers deserves to be in the top 10 rarest NES games, if we're excluding Stadium Events and Nintendo World Championships, those top 10. And this is the place it finds itself on my list. So after Snow Brothers, I would say Zombie Nation. I don't see Zombie Nation really that much. I see some of these other rare games even more than I see Zombie Nation, but I do know that it isn't quite as rare as these games. I'm not sure why it's rare. I guess it just didn't get a lot of exposure, and it's a late release game like a lot of these other games on the list. It finds a nice place here between Snow Brothers and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers 2, which is the next one on the list here. And then it's also followed by DuckTales 2. These are both rare games. They are almost hand in hand. I do see Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers a little bit less than I see DuckTales 2. But those are the next rarest games, and they're also very fun. So just below those top tier games is Fire and Ice, Contra Force, Wacky Races, Wayne's World, Gun Knack, Swordmaster, Dragon Fighter, Color a Dinosaur, Princess Tomato in the Salad Kingdom, Scat, Die Hard, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, Mighty Final Fight, Kid Clown, Cowboy Kid, Bomberman 2, and Godzilla 2. Now I'm going to move on to some games that I think are really undervalued and maybe go under the radar as, I guess, secret rares. And then some of the other games that I'm going to mention here are lesser known rares that have recently been going up in value due to the increasing number of collectors going for complete NES North American library. So I'm going to start off here with some of the games that I think fly under the radar a bit, such as Conan and Cliffhanger, Championship Pool, Power Punch 2, Race America, Goal 2, Rollerblade Racer, Supercars, Tecmo World Cup Soccer, and Terminator. These are games that I really don't see very often. They're not super rare, but they definitely do not get recognized as games that are as rare as they really are. Some games that are starting to get recognized as being more difficult to find are games like Hills Fire, that's a Dungeons and Dragons game, Swamp Thing, Toxic Crusaders, Mario's Time Machine, G.I. Joe Real American Hero, Casino Kid 2, Cool World, Motor City Patrol, and Last Action Hero. So I think that just about covers all of the rare games that were licensed by Nintendo for the North American Nintendo Entertainment System library. If you have some other ideas of games that you think could be included on this list or you feel should be, leave a comment below letting me know and letting other viewers know. I'd love to hear your input. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel because I have several other videos covering rare games and collecting for different Nintendo consoles. And in the future, I will be releasing other rarity lists and collector's guides for other consoles besides Nintendo. That's it for this episode of Playas Guide. Later, Playas.